Hello, grade 8. Welcome to the lesson for 2 July. Remember, we are doing the Industrial Revolution in Britain in Southern Africa. So you did this topic in term 1. So we are just revising what you did in term 1. Remember, we started on the 1st of July, the topic. So we are just continuing with the very same topic. Okay, so what is the objective for today's lesson? We're going to look at changes during the Industrial Revolution in Britain and the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in South Africa, brought about by diamond mining and Britain's increasing interest in South Africa. So that is the objective for today's lesson. Okay, and then we want to recap on the previous lesson. What did you learn in the previous lesson? If you still remember, we looked at the following topics: changes during the Industrial Revolution in Britain. That was the main topic. And then the subtopics that we looked at were the following. We looked at wealth from slave trade. Number 2, economy before the Industrial Revolution. Number 3, what the Industrial Revolution was. Number 4, social changes during the Industrial Revolution. Number 5, labor resistance, the trade union movement, and working class organizations. And lastly, we looked at increased power and wealth of Britain and Western European economies. So that is what we looked at in the previous lesson. So we're just going through the changes that happened during the Industrial Revolution in Britain. So there were many changes during that time when the revolution happened. Remember, they got their wealth from trading slaves, and also the economy was different before the Industrial Revolution. People were doing farming in the rural areas before the Industrial Revolution came in. And when the Industrial Revolution came, there were also social changes in the way the people, the way they were living in societies. There were some changes because of the Industrial Revolution. So the way people were living in rural areas before they moved to urban areas, there was a great transformation in that. And then we saw there was some resistance from other people, the workers, and that led to trade unions being formed and some working class organizations. And also we looked at how the wealth of Britain increased because of this industrial revolution. So that's what we looked at in the previous lesson. And then we're going to revise the previous activity. Remember, I gave you homework on the 1st of July. So you were supposed to use this table to answer the questions. So you were supposed to use this table to answer the questions. So make sure you correct your work as we revise together. Just have your work with you so that we can revise together. Okay, question 1. For question 1, you were supposed to draw a histogram showing child employment. So the histogram that you draw, it has to be similar to this one. So you can check if you drew properly on the correct figures. So here, these are numbers. These are numbers of the children who are working. And on this side, it's showing you the years from 1851 to 1881. And then here you've got the males and females under 15 who are working in the textile industry. Here we've got the males and females under 15 who are working in the mining industry. So you were supposed to draw a histogram like this one. I hope you did that. So just check your answer. Check if you managed to do the same. And then we go to question 2. Explain what you notice when you compare the number of males and females under 15 working in mining and textiles. So you were supposed to use the table again. So if you look at the table, there were more males under 15 working in the mining industry. Let's go back and check on the table. There were more males working in the mining industry. As you can see from here, more males under 15 working in the mining industry. That's correct, right? Sorry. And then there were more females under 15 working in the textile industry. There were more females under 15 working in the textile industry. Let's go back and check. There were more females under 15 working in the textile industry. That's correct. If you check here, more females working in the textile industry. So that was the answer to that. So that was question 2. And then we go to question 3. During which years were the number of children working in mines and in textiles and dyeing the highest and the lowest? Why do you think this was so? So your answers were supposed to be the following. In both industries, the numbers were high in 1851 and dropped in 1881. Let's go and check. The numbers were high in 1851 and dropped in 1881. So the numbers were high in 1851. Here you can see. And then they dropped in 1881 here and here. So you can see the difference between 1881 for males and 1851. And also for females, the number dropped from 1851 to 1881. What was the reason behind this? What was the reason behind the answer that you got here? Why did it drop in 1881? But in 1851, there were more kids working. It's because it became illegal for children to be employed. Also, machines became too heavy for the children to operate. And also because of new technology inventions. Remember, by 1881, new technology was being invented. So children no longer needed to work in the industries. That's why the number dropped than in 1851. And the machines, they became too heavy for the children. And it was also illegal in that time for children to be employed. I think new rights were introduced, new children's rights, so that they couldn't work. So that was question 3. Okay, and then last time I gave you key terms to research. I hope you researched those terms or words. The first term that you're supposed to research is African kingdoms. What are African kingdoms? These are a territory or land belonging to African people. So it was the land that belonged to African people. They were called African kingdoms. Number 2, Boer republics. These were independent, self-governed republics created by the Dutch-speaking inhabitants in South Africa. So the Dutch people who were living in South Africa, they formed these republics, which were known as Boer republics. Number 3, we have Cape Colony. It was an area established by the Dutch East India Company in Cape Town. So it was called a Cape Colony. Number 4, East India Company. This was a historical English company founded in 1600. It was called East India Company. So it was formed by the British or the English people. And then, what are endangered laborers? Endangered laborers. These are workers in a system of forced labor. So these workers who were forced to work, they were called indentured laborers. That's the meaning of the two words. It simply means workers who work using a forced labor. And then there were passenger Indians. Remember, there were Indians who were coming from India to Natal. Others, they were indentured laborers, other Indians. And then there were passenger Indians. These Indians are the ones who paid for their own voyage to Natal. So these passenger Indians, they were coming freely to Natal without being forced to work. So they paid for their own journey. What do we mean by voyage? It's a journey. So they paid for their journey to Natal. They were called passenger Indians. So those were the key terms that you were supposed to research that I gave you in the last lesson. So just correct if maybe your answers are totally different. But if they're similar to this, that's fine. You just go through. I'll give you a few seconds before we move on. Okay. Now, for today, the topic that we're looking at today is Southern Africa by 1860. So you can see that a revision of term 1. So we are still revising term 1 topic. So we're going to look at the brief description of political settlement. We're going to look at endangered labor from India to work on sugar plantations in British colony of Natal. That is what we're going to look at today. Okay. For the brief description of political settlement, we're going to discuss just a few things. In 1860s, South Africa was made of various colonies and kingdoms. So there were the following colonies: the Cape Colony, which is now Western Cape, Northern Cape, and Eastern Cape. It was called the Cape Colony. Zulu Kingdom, which is now known as KwaZulu-Natal. It was a Zulu Kingdom. The Orange Free State, which is now the Free State. It was called Orange Free State. The Transvaal, this includes Gauteng and other parts of Limpopo. Swazi Kingdom is the Swaziland, the country of Swaziland. It was called the Swazi Kingdom. And then Basotho land is now Lesotho, the country of Lesotho. It was called Basotho land. So those were the political settlements in the 1860s in South Africa. Yes, I think you still remember this from term 1. Okay, and then we look at endangered labor from India to work on sugar plantations in British colony of Natal. Remember, we looked at the term indentured labor. These are people who are forced to work. So these people were coming from India, the indentured laborers. Indians arrived in South Africa from 1860 and were transported as indentured laborers to work on sugar plantations of the Natal colony as coal miners, and also they were working on the railway construction. So these Indians, they were transported uh, to Natal. So in other words, they were like slaves being transported to Natal. So they were indentured laborers. The British traders formed the East India Company in 1600 to trade with India. Passenger Indians also came to Natal freely, not by forced labor. Remember the passenger Indians. So they were coming on their free will to Natal. They were different from the endangered laborers. So that is how the endangered labor was taking place in Natal. So these transported Indians, they were going to work on plantations, on big farms of sugarcane in KwaZulu-Natal. And then I want you to research on the following key terms. Bloemfontein Convention. Just research, you should know about it, it's very important. What was the Bloemfontein Convention? De Beers, what is De Beers? And then you research on Diamond Corporation, only those 3 times. So it's Bloemfontein Convention, De Beers, and Diamond Corporation. And then we're going to revise them in the next lesson. Okay, for the homework, here's your homework. I transferred it from the worksheet. So we are going to refer to source 1 and source 2 to answer the following questions. So on this slide, you can see source 1. So you read source 1, and then you read source 2, and then you answer the questions. So let's start by source 1, African farming in the 1860s. This passage tells how Black Africans were self-sufficient in the 1860s and didn't need to work for whites to earn an income. African farmers in Natal were able to produce enough crops for trade. They therefore had no need to work on the unattractive terms offered by white farmers and planters. Taxes and rents were paid out of sale of foodstuffs. 40 years later, an early settler remembered that in the 1860s, if we wanted supplies, we would take a wagon and ox and go into the location or district where the natives were. We used to buy corn for our supplies from the natives. So that source was adapted from The Rise and Fall of the South African Peasantry by Colin Bendy 1988. So that is source 1. Just a few seconds, have a look at it or read again. And then we go to source 2. Not slave, not free. This passage describes the endangered system and why people signed endangers. Many people endangered themselves in return for the chance to emigrate, to leave the country where they were born and to settle elsewhere. This followed on the heels of the age of exploration. While the nations of Europe were acquiring colonies, the idea arose that people who were unemployed at home should be resettled where their labor could be used. Britain was the first country to practice endangered emigration on a large scale. During the 17th and 18th centuries, thousands of poor men and women endangered themselves to persons who paid their passage money to the British colonies in North America. When they arrived there, they worked as servants for a small wage or no wage at all for a set number of years. If they survived, they were then free to farm or to start a business of their own. So that is source 2. So this source is just describing how the endangered laborers were surviving. And then we'll go to the questions. There are 5 questions. Question 1. Explain why Africans in Natal did not need to work for white farmers. So you're going to explain why Africans in Natal did not need to work for white farmers. Number 2, how did Africans survive? Number 3, explain what you understand by the following terms. A, endangered laborers. B, immigrants. 4, how did endangered laborers gain their freedom? How did endangered laborers gain their freedom? Number 5, explain the title of the extract in source 2. Not slave, not free. So what does that title mean? You're supposed to explain. What does it mean when they say not slave, not free? So you explain that title. So those are the questions for today's topic. Make sure you answer the questions as homework. Just giving you time so that you can write down. If you're not taking a screenshot, okay, we've come to the end of the lesson. Those are the details. If you've got any questions, the emails that are there, you can use either of them. This one is my email. So if you've got any questions, you can email me. I'll just show you for a few seconds and then we end the lesson. So it was nice knowing new grade 8, and then I'll be showing you the next lesson. And remember, next week we'll be doing geography. So that was the lesson. Thank you so much. Take care.